The world's most beautiful woman looked like a ghost after 72 hours without sleep in a hospital chair. Ava Gardner had promised her dying friend she would never leave her side. But when the moment came to keep that promise, she discovered some choices destroy you whether you make them or not. Los Angeles, California. September 14th, 1959. The fluorescent lights in Cedars-Sinai Hospital's intensive care unit buzzed with the relentless hum of machinery keeping people alive who should have been dead. Room 314 had become Ava Gardner's entire universe for the past 3 days. A universe that consisted of one hospital bed, one uncomfortable vinyl chair, and the sound of her best friend's labored breathing through a ventilator. Bappie Reeves lay unconscious on the narrow bed, her body connected to more tubes and wires than seemed humanly possible. At 41, she looked ancient, her face gray and sunken, bearing no resemblance to the vibrant woman who had been Ava's closest friend for over 15 years. The woman who had shared every secret, every heartbreak, every triumph. The woman who had been more of a sister than Ava's actual sisters, more loyal than any husband, more constant than fame or fortune or any of the other fleeting things that had defined Ava's public life. 72 hours earlier, Bappie had collapsed during what should have been a routine lunch at the Beverly Hills Hotel. One moment she was laughing about Ava's latest romantic disaster. The next, she was convulsing on the marble floor of the hotel's elegant dining room, blood frothing from her mouth, while horrified socialites scattered like startled birds. Brain aneurysm, the doctors had explained with clinical detachment. Massive hemorrhage. If she survived the surgery, which was unlikely, she would probably never regain consciousness. And if by some miracle she did wake up, she would be severely brain damaged, requiring constant care for whatever remained of her life. "You should go home, Miss Gardner," Dr. Harrison had suggested on the first night, his voice carrying the exhausted patience of a man who had delivered too much bad news to too many families. "There's nothing you can do here. We'll call if there's any change." But Ava had refused to leave. She had made a promise to Bappie during those first terrifying hours in the emergency room, whispering it into her unconscious friend's ear while nurses worked frantically around them. "I won't leave you alone, honey. Whatever happens, you won't be alone." It seemed like such a simple promise at the time, such an easy vow to keep. How hard could it be to sit beside a hospital bed and wait? Ava had discovered exactly how hard it could be. Hour 12. She had still looked like herself, though worry had etched new lines around her eyes. She had changed out of her blood-stained lunch dress into a simple gray suit, had combed her hair, had even applied lipstick out of habit. She sat properly in the vinyl chair, back straight, hands folded, looking like the movie star she was supposed to be even in crisis. Hour 24. The first cracks had begun to show. Her hair was disheveled from running her fingers through it nervously. Her makeup had long since worn off, revealing the pale exhaustion underneath. She had kicked off her high heels and curled her legs beneath her in the chair, abandoning the careful posture that had been drilled into her by years of studio training. Hour 36. She looked like a different person entirely. Her elegant suit was wrinkled and stained with coffee from the machine down the hall. Her famous green eyes were bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. She had begun talking to Bappie's unconscious form, carrying on one-sided conversations about everything and nothing, as if the sound of her voice alone could somehow call her friend back from wherever she had gone. Hour 48. The hallucinations had started. Brief flickers at the edge of her vision, shadows that looked like people, sounds that might have been voices. Dr. Harrison had stopped by again, more insistent this time. "Miss Gardner, you need rest. Real rest. In a real bed. This isn't helping anyone, especially not Mrs. Reeves." But Ava had refused again, more vehemently this time. She couldn't leave. She had promised. Bappie had been there for her through 3 divorces, countless affairs, professional disasters, family deaths, and every other crisis that had marked her adult life. The least she could do was be there for this. Hour 60. She was barely recognizable as the woman who had graced magazine covers and movie screens for 20 years. Her hair hung limp and greasy around her face. Her clothes looked like she had slept in them, which she had, in uncomfortable snatches that lasted no more than 20 minutes at a time. She had developed a nervous tic, constantly checking Bappie's pulse, adjusting her blankets, smoothing her hair, as if constant movement could somehow ward off death through sheer force of will. Hour 68. She was hallucinating regularly now, seeing her mother in the corner of the room, hearing Frank Sinatra's voice in the hallway, watching Mickey Rooney pace by the window. The boundary between sleeping and waking had dissolved entirely. She existed in a strange twilight state, where past and present bled together, where the hospital room became a stage set for every significant moment of her life. Hour 70. She was talking constantly now, a stream of consciousness monologue directed at Bappie's motionless form. She confessed things she had never told anyone, her real feelings about her failed marriages, her fears about aging in Hollywood, her desperate loneliness despite being surrounded by people who claimed to love her. She begged Bappie to wake up, to give her some sign, to not abandon her like everyone else eventually did. Hour 72. She looked like a corpse herself. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that matched the hospital walls. Her hands shook constantly from exhaustion and too much coffee, and the crushing weight of watching someone she loved slip away minute by minute. She had stopped bothering to check her appearance in the small mirror above the sink. For the first time in her adult life, how she looked didn't matter. That's when Dr. Harrison returned with Dr. Patricia Williams, the hospital's chief of neurology, and 2 nurses Ava didn't recognize. Their expressions were grave, the kind of solemnity that preceded life-altering conversations. "Miss Gardner," Dr. Williams said gently, "we need to talk." Ava looked up from her vigil, her eyes struggling to focus on the group of medical professionals who had invaded her sanctuary. Has something changed?" "In a way, yes," Dr. Williams replied, pulling up another chair so she could sit facing Ava directly. "Miss Gardner, Mrs. Reeves has been in a deep coma for 72 hours. Her brain activity is minimal. The swelling in her brain hasn't decreased despite our best efforts. At this point, the machines are keeping her alive, but they're not helping her recover." Ava's hands found Bappie's under the hospital blanket, squeezing the limp fingers as if her touch alone could somehow transfer life from her body to her friend's. But she could still wake up, right? People wake up from comas all the time. I read about it. Sometimes they wake up after weeks, months even. Dr. Williams exchanged a glance with Dr. Harrison before continuing. Miss Gardner, I need you to understand something. Mrs. Reeves suffered massive brain damage. Even if she were to regain consciousness, which is extremely unlikely, she would not be the woman you knew. She would require round-the-clock care. She might not recognize you, might not be able to speak or move or take care of herself in any way. I don't care, Ava said immediately. I'll take care of her. I have money, I can hire the best nurses, the best doctors. I can... Miss Gardner. Dr. Williams's voice was firm but kind. There's something else. Mrs. Reeves has been asking us to share her wishes with you. Ava's blood turned cold. What do you mean, asking? She's unconscious. Before her surgery, while she was still lucid, Mrs. Reeves made her feelings very clear about what she would want if she ended up in this situation. She was quite specific about her wishes, and she asked us to make sure you understood them. Dr. Harrison pulled out a manila folder and withdrew several official-looking documents. She signed a living will 6 months ago, Miss Gardner. She was very thorough about what she wanted and didn't want if she ever became incapacitated. Ava's hands began to shake as she looked at the papers without really seeing them. She knew what they were going to tell her. Part of her had known from the moment Bappie collapsed that this conversation was coming. But knowing something intellectually and being forced to confront it emotionally were entirely different experiences. She specifically requested that if she were ever in a vegetative state with no reasonable hope of recovery, she did not want to be kept alive by artificial means. Dr. Williams continued. She was very clear about this. She said she had seen too many families destroy themselves, trying to keep loved ones alive when the person they were trying to save was already gone. The words hung in the sterile air like poison gas. Ava felt them settling into her lungs, her bloodstream, her bones. She looked at Bappie's face, still beautiful despite the gray pallor, still recognizable despite the tubes and wires. How could this peaceful-looking woman be gone when her heart was still beating, when her chest was still rising and falling, when her body was still warm to the touch? She also left a letter for you specifically, Dr. Harrison said, his voice gentle. She gave it to her lawyer with instructions to deliver it only if this situation arose. One of the nurses handed Ava an envelope with her name written in Bappie's familiar handwriting. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it, let alone open it. After 3 attempts, Dr. Williams gently took it from her and opened it herself. "Would you like me to read it?" she asked. Ava could only nod, her throat too tight for words. Dr. Williams cleared her throat and began to read in a steady, professional voice that somehow made Bappie's words even more devastating. "My dearest Ava, if you're hearing this, it means I'm in exactly the situation I never wanted to be in, and you're faced with exactly the decision I never wanted you to have to make. I know you, honey. I know you're probably sitting beside my bed right now, refusing to leave, refusing to give up, thinking that your love and determination alone can somehow bring me back. But I need you to listen to me now, maybe for the last time. I don't want to live as a vegetable. I don't want you to spend years of your life visiting someone who looks like me, but isn't really me anymore. I don't want you to pour your money and energy into keeping my body alive when my soul is already gone. Most of all, I don't want you to carry the guilt of making this decision alone. I'm making it for you, sweetheart. I'm telling you to let me go. I know this is going to hurt you. I know you're going to think you're betraying me or giving up on me, but you're not. You're honoring what I want, what I've always wanted. I've lived a good life, a full life. I've loved and been loved. I've seen things and done things and experienced more joy than most people ever get to have. And the best part of that life has been our friendship. You saved me, Ava. When my marriage fell apart, when I thought I had nothing left to live for, you showed me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to love you and stick by you no matter what. You gave me 20 years of laughter and adventure and the kind of friendship most people only dream about. Now I'm asking you to give me one final gift. The gift of letting me go with dignity, with love, while the good memories are still stronger than the bad ones. Don't let them keep my body alive while my spirit is already free. Don't torture yourself trying to keep something alive that's already gone. And please, please don't spend the rest of your life feeling guilty about making the right choice. I love you, honey. I always have, I always will. But love sometimes means knowing when to hold on and when to let go. This is a letting go time. Take care of yourself. Live your life. Be happy. And when you think of me, don't think of this hospital room or these machines or this sadness. Think of all the good times. Think of all the laughter. Think of how lucky we were to find each other in this crazy world. All my love, always. Bappie P.S. There's a bottle of Dom Perignon 1943 in my apartment, hidden behind the winter coats in my bedroom closet. I was saving it for your next wedding, but I think you should drink it in celebration of our friendship instead. Don't drink it alone, though. Find someone who loved us both and share it with them. Tell them stories about us and laugh until you cry. By the time Dr. Williams finished reading, Ava was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. The letter had been pure Bappie, practical, loving, funny even in the face of death, and absolutely, completely clear about what she wanted. But knowing what Bappie wanted and being able to act on it were two entirely different things. I can't, Ava whispered. I can't do it. I can't tell you to turn off the machines. How do I do that? How do I look at her and say it's okay to let her die? Dr. Williams moved her chair closer and took one of Ava's hands in both of hers. Miss Gardner, you wouldn't be letting her die. She's already gone. What you would be doing is allowing her body to follow her spirit. You would be honoring her wishes and showing her the ultimate act of love and respect. But what if she wakes up? Ava asked desperately. What if tomorrow or next week she just opens her eyes? What if I give up on her and she could have come back? Dr. Harrison spoke up, his voice heavy with the weight of delivering truth that no one wanted to hear. Miss Gardner, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've seen thousands of cases like this. Mrs. Reeves is not going to wake up. The damage to her brain is too extensive. The machines are moving air in and out of her lungs and keeping her heart beating. But the person you knew and loved is gone. Ava looked at Bappie's face, searching for some sign, some flicker of consciousness that might give her a different answer. But her friend looked peaceful, almost serene, as if she had already made peace with whatever came next. If I say yes, Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens? We would remove the ventilator and the other life support machines, Dr. Williams explained gently. We would make sure she's comfortable, that she's not in any pain. You could stay with her. It would be peaceful. How long would it take? Usually within minutes. Sometimes longer, but not much longer. Ava closed her eyes and tried to imagine what Bappie would say if their positions were reversed. She could hear her friend's voice as clearly as if she were speaking. "Oh, honey, stop being so dramatic. I'm already gone. You're just hanging on to a body at this point. Let me go with some dignity before this gets any more depressing." That was exactly what Bappie would say. Practical, direct, with just enough humor to take the edge off the pain. "I need a few minutes," Ava said finally, "alone with her, to say goodbye properly." The medical team nodded and quietly left the room, closing the door behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo like thunder in the sudden silence. Ava moved her chair as close to the bed as possible and took both of Bappie's hands in hers. For the first time in 72 hours, she really looked at her friend's face, not searching for signs of improvement or consciousness, but simply looking at the woman who had been the most important relationship of her adult life. "I hate you for this," she whispered, and then immediately started crying again. "I hate that you're making me make this decision. I hate that you planned for this and wrote that letter and made it all logical and reasonable when nothing about this feels logical or reasonable." She squeezed the unresponsive hands, remembering all the times those hands had held hers. During her divorce from Mickey, during the fights with Frank, during her mother's funeral, during every crisis and celebration and ordinary Tuesday afternoon when they had sat drinking coffee and solving the problems of the world. "I understand why you want to go," she continued, her voice steadier now. "I understand that you don't want to live like this. But I don't understand how I'm supposed to live without you. You're the only person who really knows me, who loves me for who I am, instead of who you want me to be. How do I do this life without you?" She sat in silence for several minutes, holding Bappie's hands and listening to the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator, trying to memorize the feeling of her friend's presence, even though she knew that presence was probably already gone. Finally, she leaned forward and kissed Bappie's forehead, the way her mother used to kiss hers when she was sick as a child. "Okay, honey," she whispered. "I'll let you go. But you better be waiting for me on the other side, you hear me? And you better have that bottle of champagne ready, because when I get there, we're going to have one hell of a reunion party." She pressed the call button and waited for the medical team to return. Dr. Williams entered first, followed by the others, their expressions carefully neutral but compassionate. "Have you made your decision, Miss Gardner?" Ava nodded, her voice surprisingly steady. "Yes. Remove the machines. Let her go." What followed was the longest and shortest 23 minutes of Ava Gardner's life. The medical team worked with quiet efficiency, removing tubes and wires while explaining each step in soft voices. They assured her that Bappie couldn't feel anything, that she wasn't suffering, that this was peaceful. And it was peaceful. When the ventilator was turned off, when the machines stopped their electronic chorus, the room became profoundly quiet. Ava held Bappie's hands and listened to her natural breathing, shallow and irregular, but her own. For the first time in 3 days, Her friend looked like herself again. Not a patient, but a person. Bappie died at 6:47 a.m. on September 17, 1959, with Ava Gardner holding her hands and whispering stories about all the good times they had shared. Her breathing simply became shallower and more infrequent, until finally it stopped altogether. Ava sat with her for another hour, unable to let go of those hands, unable to accept that her friend was really gone. When she finally stood up and walked out of room 314, she was a different person than the one who had walked in 75 hours earlier. The decision to honor Bappie's wishes, to let her die with dignity rather than clinging to false hope, changed everything about how Ava Gardner approached life and death and love and loss. She learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let go, even when letting go feels like dying yourself. She kept Bappie's letter for the rest of her life, reading it whenever she faced impossible decisions or when grief threatened to overwhelm her. Perignon, 1943, hidden exactly where Bappie had said it would be. She drank it 6 months later with Frank Sinatra, who had loved Bappie too, and they spent the evening telling stories and laughing until they cried, just as Bappie had requested. The 72-hour vigil that had nearly broken her ultimately taught her something invaluable about the nature of love and loyalty and the courage required to honor someone else's wishes, even when those wishes break your heart. She learned that keeping a promise sometimes means letting go of the person you made the promise to, and that the most difficult choices often turn out to be the most loving ones. For the rest of her life, whenever Ava Gardner faced impossible decisions, she would think about those 72 hours in room 314 and remember that love is not about holding on at any cost, but about having the wisdom to know when holding on becomes a form of selfishness rather than devotion. The choice that had seemed like it would destroy her, whether she made it or not, turned out to be the choice that taught her the true meaning of both friendship and courage. And though she never stopped missing Bappie Reeves, she never regretted honoring her friend's final wish. Even though making that choice in that sterile hospital room at 6:47 a.m. on a September morning, nearly 20 years ago, remained the hardest thing she ever did.